My name is Mark and I am a 35-year-old accountant from Denver, Colorado. Until recently, I thought I had a solid marriage with my wife, Emily. We have been together for 12 years, married for 8 years. We met in college, a classic campus romance. She an artistic, free-spirited theatergoer, me a down-to-earth financier who loved her whirlwind ideas. Emily brought excitement into my life, and I kept us anchored, or at least that's what I thought. Last December, everything I thought I knew about her, about us, collapsed like a house of cards in a gust of wind. It started the same way it always does in our neighborhood. Christmas on our street is practically a competition. People come out with life-size Santas, synchronized light shows, fake snowplows. It's crazy, but I love it. Emily especially loved it. Every year she pushed the boundaries, turning our house into something out of a Hallmark movie. Our house became the unofficial holiday attraction of the street. I never questioned that. In retrospect, I can say that I should have. Last year, she was more obsessive than usual. She claimed she was trying to perfect the light pieces. I remember teasing her about it one evening as she was getting ready to go out, tucking her clipboard under her arm. "If you keep this up, people will think you run NORAD," I joked. She laughed, but somehow strained, as if I'd said something too close to home. A few weeks later, my buddy Nate came over for a beer and a Broncos game. Nate is an IT guy, the kind of guy who can hack into a router just to see if he can do it. At halftime, we went outside to admire Emily's work. Nate took a long look at the light, frowning his eyebrows. "Man, your wife has some serious skills," he said, sipping his beer. "Yeah, she has," I said proudly. "No, I mean, those sequences? They're not random. It's a code, man." "A code?" I laughed. "Like computer code?" "Sort of. It looks intentional, like a pattern that's supposed to mean something. You don't see that?" I didn't see it, but Nate's words planted a seed of doubt in my head. That night, after Emily went to bed, I reviewed the security footage of our house. Our cameras captured everything: the front yard, the street lights, the street. I scrolled through the footage from weeks ago, paying attention to the moments when she left the house to set up the display. And that's when I noticed it. She wasn't just fiddling with the bulbs. She was standing and looking at the neighbor's house. And the lights? They flickered in short, purposeful flashes, almost rhythmically. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I convinced myself it was a coincidence, but the feeling of unease wouldn't go away. The next day, Emily left her notebook on the kitchen table while she went to the store. I'm not proud of it, but I opened it. Inside were diagrams of our garlands. Some pages were innocent, sketches of snowflakes and color schemes, but others were labeled with phrases like, "Meet me," and "All clear." My stomach churned. My hands shook as I flipped pages. Evidence stared me in the face. That night I came face to face with her. She came home humming a Christmas tune and put the groceries away. I couldn't hold back any longer. "What the hell is this, Emily?" I said, tossing the notepad on the counter. Her face went pale. "Mark, I can explain, Dash." "Explain what?" "That you used our Christmas lights to send messages?" "To whom?" She stuttered, her eyes darting everywhere but at me. For a moment I thought she might be lying, but then her shoulders slumped. "It's Tom," she said quietly. "Tom, our neighbor. The guy I'd had a beer with more than once. The guy whose kids played with ours over the summer." I felt like the floor had been ripped out from under my feet. "For how long?" She hesitated, then whispered, 8 years. 8 years. Almost as long as we'd been married. I felt dizzy as the weight of her betrayal crashed down on me. Every Christmas, every carefully orchestrated light show had been part of her affair. While I thought we were providing holiday cheer, she was using our decorations to cheat. I jumped out of the house and drove aimlessly around town for several hours. I didn't know where to go or what to do. The woman I loved, the life I thought we had built together, had turned out to be a lie. The next few days passed like a blur. Emily tried to talk to me, to explain, but what could be said? She betrayed me in the most calculated, manipulative way possible. And Tom? He didn't even have the decency to look me in the eye. His house stayed dark that Christmas. I'm still trying to figure out what to do. Do I keep her? Do I try to rebuild the relationship? Will I ever be able to trust her again? I don't know. All I know is that every time I see a string of Christmas lights, all I feel is rage. And that's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't just steal your trust. It steals your joy, your traditions, your sense of security. And I don't know if I'll ever get it back. My name is Mark, and by this point, my life was starting to resemble a bad reality TV show. I was a 35-year-old guy from Denver who thought I had it all worked out. A stable job, a beautiful wife, Emily, and a neighborhood where kids play spot the street. But after I discovered that my wife was using our Christmas lights to communicate with our neighbor, Tom, my world seemed to crumble beneath my feet. I've spent the last few nights delving into surveillance footage, trying to make sense of it all. My curiosity turned into an obsession. I wasn't just looking for answers, I was looking for a timeline of events. How long had this been going on? What signs had I missed? Truth be told, I hated to admit how blind I was. The videotapes were killer. Every night, like clockwork, Emily would go outside to adjust the lights. She took her time, standing in the cold with tablet in hand and looking toward Tom's house. I replayed this sequence of actions over and over again, and my stomach twisted into knots as I realized how elaborate these patterns were. Every flicker of light, every pause, every burst of color, none of it was random. It wasn't art or perfectionism. It was a conversation I wasn't a part of. I began to piece together the details. 8 years. That's how long the affair had lasted, according to her, when I confronted her. 8 years of deception woven into the very fabric of our life together. It didn't make sense at first. How could someone continue to live like this for almost 10 years and not falter? I asked myself this as I sat at the kitchen table, going over all the minute details of the last few years in my mind. The thing is, when you know the truth, everything takes on a different meaning. Every late-night grocery shopping trip, every sudden interest in decorating, every time she brushed off my questions, it all came together. There was one memory I couldn't shake off. It was about 4 years ago, during one of our elaborate Christmas pageants. Emily insisted on adding this massive garland to the roof. I complained, saying it was too much work, but she was adamant. "It will tie everything together," she said. She even climbed up there herself to install it, saying she didn't trust me to do it right. At the time, I thought it was her creative streak. Now, however, I saw that it was just another piece of their puzzle. The garland was perfectly placed in front of Tom's house, and I realized that it had probably been part of their secret code for years. The worst part was realizing how easily I'd been played. Emily wasn't some villain. She was my wife, the person I trusted more than anyone in the world. And yet she managed to lead a secret life right under my nose. I kept going back to my notes, looking for the moment it all started. I don't know why it was so important, but I needed to understand how we got here. What was the catalyst? When was the line crossed? The security footage was only loosely available, but it gave me a few pieces of the puzzle. The footage of them chatting in the driveway, of Tom helping her carry jewelry, of the two of them standing too close together glimmered. Little moments that seemed innocent then, but now felt like a punch in the gut. I began to remember things I had previously ignored or brushed off. Like the time Tom complimented her on the exhibition and she blushed like a schoolgirl. Or the time he showed up at our door with a spare string of lights that she'd obviously borrowed. Or the way she was always in a good mood when she ran into him at the mailbox. Tom. That name sounded like a curse in my head. I couldn't look at his house the same old way anymore. His holiday decorations, usually quite modest compared to ours, suddenly seemed sinister, as if they were mocking me. I spent a lot of time watching his house from my living room window. Not in a stalking way, at least I didn't think so, but I couldn't help it. I needed to understand what kind of man could maintain an affair with another man's wife for 8 years. What did he have that I didn't? What kind of man was he? Tom was in his 40s, the kind of man who wore flannel shirts and always had a beer in his hand. He had a wife, Linda, and 2 teenage children growing up with other kids on the street. At first glance, he seemed like an ordinary suburban dad. But now I saw him for what he really was, a liar, a cheat, and a coward. I wanted to confront him. I wanted to cross the street, knock on his door, and demand answers. But every time I thought about it, my chest constricted. What if he denied everything? What if he laughed in my face? Or worse, what if his family was home and overheard everything? I ran through all the scenarios in my head, imagining how things would play out. Would I hit him? Would I yell? Would I just stand there, frozen, unable to find the words? In the end, I didn't do anything. I just sat and stared at his house as if it held all the answers. But the truth was, I wasn't just mad at Tom. I was angry at Emily, at myself, at the whole damn situation. I couldn't stop thinking about the betrayal, not just the physical betrayal, but the emotional betrayal as well. She'd chosen him, over and over again, for 8 years. And me? I was a fool, completely unaware of what shadows lurked in my own home. The hardest part was realizing that it couldn't be fixed with an apology or a second chance. The damage had been done. Trust had been lost. And as much as I wanted to go back to the way things were, I couldn't help but see the truth. All I could do was sit, stare at Tom's house and wonder how it all went wrong. My name is Mark, and by the time I found Emily's notebook, I had already seen enough to suspect something wrong. Still, part of me kept hoping that I was wrong, that I was reading too much. That hope crumbled as soon as I flipped through those pages. The notebook lay on the table as if nothing had happened. She used it to jot down to-do lists, shopping reminders, even notes about a new recipe she wanted to try. At first glance, it looked innocent enough. But after a few pages, I discovered the diagrams. Each sketch was precise and showed the layout of our holiday light displays. She drew every section of garland, every string of twinkling bulbs, every little detail. At first I thought she was just being too meticulous, typical Emily. But then I saw the words written next to some of the patterns. Meet me? All clear. Same time tomorrow? My stomach sank. I flipped through the rest of the notebook, page by page, as if trying to solve a mystery. And indeed it was. It wasn't just a random collection of entries, it was a coded system. Each page seemed to tell some story that I was not invited to enter. The sketches matched the light patterns I'd seen on the surveillance footage. I sat down at the kitchen table, clutching the sketchbook like it was some kind of cursed artifact. How long had this been going on? Why is she doing this? Wasn't I enough for her? I thought back to the last 8 years of our marriage. Emily had always been creative, a dreamer. She loved big, dramatic gestures. When we were dating, she once drove across 3 states to surprise me with a birthday dinner. I loved that about her passion, her spontaneity. But now I wondered if that penchant for drama was part of what had gotten her into this mess. I didn't argue with her right away. I couldn't. There were too many questions in my head, too many doubts. I needed to get more information before I made my move. Over the next few days, I became obsessed. I began to look at everything Emily did through a new prism. Every word she said, every move she made, every little habit I used to find endearing, all of it now seemed suspicious to me. She would go outside to adjust the light, as she always did. I watched her from the window, wondering if I was witnessing the latest chapter of her betrayal. I also began to pay closer attention to Tom. His house was directly across the street and was perfectly situated to receive Emily's coded light messages. He was behaving quite normally, mowing the lawn, taking out the trash, waving to the neighbors. But I couldn't escape the feeling that his every smile, every casual gesture, was part of a lie. One night, after Emily went to bed, I decided to check her phone. I hated myself for even thinking about it, but I needed to know the truth. Her messages were clear, too clear. It was even suspicious how little there was on there. No messages to or from Tom, no weird conversations with friends. But when I looked into her browser history, I found something that made my blood run cold. Searches for Morse code basics and how to program holiday lights. It all came together. The notebook, the lights, the surveillance tape. She wasn't just cheating. She was orchestrating the most elaborate and twisted intrigue I'd ever heard of. I started writing everything down like I was building a case. Dates, times, patterns, even surveillance screenshots. I needed a clear picture of what happened and how it happened. Part of me hoped that having all the facts would make it easier for me to confront her. The other part of me wasn't sure if I even wanted to confront her. Eventually, it all became too much to keep to myself. One night when Emily was in the shower, I pulled out my notebook and put it on the counter where she'd left it a few days ago. I needed her to see it, to know that I had found it. When she came downstairs and saw the notebook, her face went pale. "What is it?" I asked in a calm but firm voice. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stared at the notepad as if it were a grenade about to explode. "It's nothing," she finally said, but the tremor in her voice gave her away. "Don't lie to me, Emily. I know what it is. I've seen the lights. I've seen the notes. I've read the damn notebook." Her shoulders slumped, and for a moment I thought she was going to start crying. But instead, she just looked at me with that defeated expression, like she knew the game was over. "It's not what you think," she said softly. "Then what is it?" replied I. There was a long pause that makes your heart race because you know something bad is coming. Finally, she spoke the words I had been dreading. "It's Tom." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "How long?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything I wanted to know. 8 years, she finally admitted. 8 years. The weight of that fact came upon me all at once. This wasn't a brief affair, not a momentary lapse in judgment. It was a full-blown affair, carefully concealed under the guise of holiday cheer. I said nothing more that night. I couldn't. I just left the house and drove aimlessly around town for a few hours, trying to make sense of what had happened. I don't know what to do next. Part of me wants to pack my bags and never look back. Another part of me wants to fight for the life we built together, even if it's built on lies. All I know is that nothing will ever be the same. My name is Mark, and by the time I worked up the courage to confront Emily, I already knew the truth. I spent hours going through her address book, security footage, and even our browser history. All the evidence pointed to the same conclusion. My wife was having an affair with Tom, our neighbor. But even knowing this, I still hoped I was wrong. In the evening, I waited until the house was quiet. The kids were already asleep and the neighbors were quieting down. Emily sat in the living room, flipping through her phone like it was nothing out of the ordinary. I felt like a kettle about to boil. Every muscle in my body tensed from the gravity of what I was about to do. "Emily," I said, my voice steady, though I could feel it shaking. "We need to talk." She looked up at me, a flicker of confusion on her face. "Sure. What's wrong?" I sat down across from her and placed the notepad on the coffee table between us. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw it, and I knew she recognized it immediately. "What's this?" she asked, feigning ignorance. "You tell me," I said. She reached for the notebook and started flipping through it like it was just a grocery list. But I could see her hands trembling, her eyes darting back and forth at me, then quickly averting. "It's nothing," she said, her voice too light, too carefree. "It's not nothing, Emily," I said, my tone becoming sharper. "I know about the lights. I know about the messages. I know about Tom." The color disappeared from her face. For a second, it looked like she might deny it, but then her expression turned rigid. "You've been spying on me?" she accused, averting her gaze like a professional. "Don't," I said, interrupting her. "Don't turn this around on me. You're the one who spent 2 years sneaking around using our Christmas lights as some sort of secret code. What the hell, Emily? What were you thinking?" Her composure gave a crack. Tears came to her eyes, and she hid her face in her palms. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she said in a muffled voice. "I swear, Mark. It got out of control." I didn't say anything. I just sat there staring at her, waiting for her to continue. "It started out as a joke," she said after a long pause. "Just silly, harmless flirting. And then one day we were talking about how intricate the light displays were, and he suggested it. A code." "The code," I repeated, my voice flat. She nodded, still not looking me in the eye. "It was supposed to be just a game," she said, "but then it became not. We started using him to set up times to meet, either at his place or ours." At that moment, I felt the air leave my lungs as if I'd been punched. "At our house?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She didn't answer, but the silence told me everything I wanted to know. I stood up, suddenly feeling the need to leave as much distance between us as possible. My mind was spinning, a million thoughts colliding at once. Every Christmas, every twinkling light, every moment I'd spent admiring her art, it was all a lie. She wasn't creating something beautiful. She was building a cover for her betrayal. "Mark, please," she said. standing up and holding out her arms to me. "I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I swear it didn't mean anything." "It meant nothing?" I said, turning to face her. "You've been sneaking around with Tom for 2 years, Emily. You used our house, our traditions, our family as a cover. How the hell can you say it didn't mean anything?" She had no answer. She just stood there, tears streaming down her face, and she looked like a victim in all of this. But she wasn't the victim. I was the victim. I grabbed my keys and walked out the door, not caring where I was going. I just needed to get away. As I drove aimlessly through the quiet streets of our neighborhood, the weight of what was happening came over me all at once. For 2 years I had lived in fantasy, completely oblivious to the reality of my own marriage. Every time I helped hang those garlands, every time I admired the way they twinkled in the night, I unconsciously played a part in her deception. I thought about Tom, about his smug grin, about how he always seemed too friendly. I thought about his family, his children. Did they know? Did Linda know? And then I thought about my own children, sleeping in their cribs, unaware that a storm was brewing in their home. By the time I got back to the house, the lights were off. Emily had already gone to bed, and the living room was dark. I stood in the front yard for a long time, looking at the house, at the garlands and twinkling lights that had once made me proud. Now all I saw was betrayal. I don't know what will happen next. Do I stay and try to pick up the pieces? Walk away and start over? Part of me wants to burn this whole exhibit to the ground to erase all reminders of what she did. But I can't. Not yet. Because even with the lights out, the truth is still there, blatant and unforgiving. And I'm not sure I'll ever be able to look at them, or her, the same way again. I'm 35 years old, a father, a husband, and until a few days ago, I thought I had a pretty normal life in the suburbs of Denver. But now I know that life was a mirage, and I can't stop replaying in my mind everything Emily told me during our confrontation. She told me how it started, how it escalated, how it all became part of this strange, twisted reality in which I was the last to know what was happening in my own home. It all started with flirting. At least that's how she put it, as if it was some harmless, meaningless thing. Emily said that during one of the block parties, she and Tom started chatting. At first they talked about Christmas lights, the displays, the programs, the sheer amount of work it takes to make them perfect. She laughed when she told me he was joking about my untrained eye that doesn't see the potential for more creative patterns. I didn't laugh. From there, it went on from there. She swore it was innocent at first, just casual conversations at the mailbox, exchanging ideas for new lighting options, tips on where to buy discounted jewelry after the holidays. Of course, she didn't tell me about these conversations. She kept that part to herself. And over time, those conversations turned into something else. The first coded light show happened 3 years ago. She called it a playful gesture, some spontaneous idea to send a quick message using our garlands on the roof. I asked her what it said, but she didn't answer. She just stared at her hands, twisting her wedding ring on her finger as if she wanted to disappear. "It doesn't mean anything," she finally said. I felt my stomach rumble. It may have meant nothing to her in that moment, but to me it meant everything. It was the spark that ignited the whole fire. As she told me more, I began to realize how deep the deception went. It wasn't just a couple of innocent flashes of light or a half-forgotten crush that had gotten out of hand. This was an entire system, a language they had created together. Each flash, each sequence, each carefully calibrated pause told a story I had never been a part of. The garlands were like their personal codebook, flashing messages only the two of them could understand. Emily explained how they used the garlands to coordinate everything. When they were meeting, where they were going, who was free at what time. I felt uneasy as I listened to her. I couldn't believe that this was my life, that my wife had turned our house into a billboard for her affair. She told me that they were careful, that the messages were subtle enough to go unnoticed by those who don't know what to pay attention to. But as I sat and looked at the garlands outside our window, I realized how blind I had been. I helped her hang those garlands. I spent hours checking timers, adjusting the placement, making sure everything looked perfect. And all the while she was using me, using our family traditions to keep her dirty little secret. The more she talked, the more I realized how much of my life was built on lies. Emily tried to explain everything, saying she didn't want things to go so far, that she didn't know how to stop once they started. But that didn't make it any easier. She walked me through the chronology of events, fragment by fragment, as if trying to convince me that things weren't as bad as they seemed. But each detail only made things worse. The first real message came a few weeks after that initial playful outburst. It was a simple, all-clear signal, just a quick sequence of white lights followed by a long pause. Tom had asked her to send it if I wasn't home so they could communicate more freely. I clenched my fists when she told me this, trying to contain my fervor. The thought of her scheduling their conversations with my absence in mind made me feel like a complete idiot. After that, the messages became more complex. They started using different colors to convey different meanings. Green for, it's safe, red for, not today, and blue for, come over. By the time I realized what was happening, they had perfected their system. It was like they'd turned our house into some kind of secret base right under my nose. As she spoke, I couldn't help but think of all the times I'd marveled at those display cases and thought how proud I was of Emily for creating something so beautiful. Now, however, every memory seemed tainted. I remembered last year when one of our neighbors came over to praise the garlands. He said they looked so precise, so intentional. I laughed at that, saying that Emily just has a talent for that sort of thing. Looking back, I felt like a fool. Precision, intent, sure, they were there. But they weren't for me, or the neighbors, or the holiday cheer. They were for Tom. I thought of all those late nights she'd spend outside setting up windows. I'd offered to help so many times, but she always waved me off, saying she had everything under control. I believed her. I trusted her. And she took that trust and used it as a weapon. By the time she finished telling me, I didn't know what to say. My thoughts were racing, my emotions bouncing between anger, sadness, and disbelief. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to call her every name I could think of. The other part of me wanted to curl up in a ball and pretend it never happened. I did neither. I just sat there, looking at her and wondering how the woman I married could do that to me. She kept apologizing, saying she was sorry, that she never meant to hurt me. But her words were empty. You don't accidentally cheat on your husband for 2 years. You don't accidentally create an entire secret language to cover up your cheating. After that night, our house was different. The garlands, the lights, even the Christmas tree, they all seemed alien in my house. I couldn't look at them without seeing the betrayal, without thinking of all the lies they helped hide. I didn't know what to do next. Part of me wanted to destroy everything, burn it all down and start over. But another part of me couldn't bring myself to touch them. They were a symbol of everything that had gone wrong, and I wasn't ready to let go of the anger yet. I felt trapped, caught between the life I thought I had and the reality that stared me in the face. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't see a way forward. Not with her. Not with Tom. Not with her. Not with Tom. Not with the lights still flickering outside. A constant reminder of the secrets they shared. My name is Mark, and until recently I thought I knew who I was. A husband. A father. A man who worked hard to build a good life in our little suburb of Denver. But now? Now I'm just a guy standing outside my neighbor Tom's house trying to muster up the courage to stand up to the man who helped destroy my marriage. It's funny in a way. I was having a beer with Tom, exchanged lawn care tips. Hell, we even worked together to put up the neighbor's Christmas tree one year. I thought he was a nice guy, a family man like me. But now, standing here, under the light of the porch light, I see him as nothing more than a snake in the grass. For days I've avoided this moment. Every time I thought about knocking on his door, my chest clenched. What could I even say? Hey, just wanted to chat about you fucking my wife behind my back? No. I felt not only anger, but humiliation. Meeting him face to face meant recognizing all the things I'd missed, all the signs I'd ignored. But I couldn't put it off forever. That night, after hours spent in the living room, I finally decided the time was right. I told myself I was doing this for closure, for answers. But in the back of my mind, I knew I wanted to regain some dignity. When I got to his door, my hand hovered over the doorbell. My heart was pounding and my palms were wet with sweat. For a moment, I thought about turning around and pretending it never happened. But then I thought of Emily, her tears, her apology, Her betrayal and all the anger I'd been holding back came to the surface. I pressed the doorbell. It seemed like an eternity before the door opened. When it opened, there he was, Tom. He looked surprised to see me, but not in the way I expected. There was no guilt or shame in his face, just slight confusion, as if I'd come to borrow a blower from him or something. "Mark," he said in his usual tone, "how are you? What's up?" I repeated, my voice low and strained. I felt my fists clench at my sides. He frowned, clearly catching my tone. "Is everything okay?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I took a step forward, shortening the distance between us. "No, Tom. Everything's not okay." Something flashed in his eyes. Recognition? Maybe? Panic? It was hard to tell. But before he could say anything else, I did something I hadn't planned. Something that surprised even me. I slapped him. It wasn't a punch. I didn't want to break his jaw or knock him out. I just wanted him to feel the prick, to realize that there were consequences to what he'd done. My hand made contact with his cheek, and the sound echoed in the quiet evening air. Tom jerked back, his hand flying up to his face. "What the hell, man?" he shouted. "What the hell?" said I, raising my voice. "Are you seriously going to stand there and pretend like you don't know why I'm here?" For a moment he looked genuinely embarrassed, and I almost started to doubt myself. But then his expression changed, as if a curtain had been pulled back, and I saw it. Guilt. Fear. "I don't know what Emily told you," he started, but I interrupted him. "Oh, she told me a lot of things," I said. "About the lights. About your little code. About the 2 years you've been sneaking around behind my back." He opened his mouth to reply, but no words came out. Instead, he just stared at me, his face pale and his hands clenched convulsively into fists. "Does your wife know?" I asked, my voice cold. It seemed to throw him off balance. "Mark, please," he said, his tone turning pleading. "Let's not drag our families into this." "Our families?" I repeated, laughing bitterly. "You weren't too concerned about our families when you fucked my wife, Tom." He flinched at my words, and for a moment I thought he would actually apologize. But instead he just looked at me with this pathetic, almost pitiful expression on his face, as if he wanted me to feel sorry for him. "I never meant to hurt you," he said quietly. That was all it was. It was all he could say for himself. I shook my head, anger boiling up inside me. "You didn't mean to hurt me? You lied to me, to your wife, to your children for 2 years. Don't just stand there and pretend you're a victim." He didn't say anything back. He just stood there, staring at the ground like a scolded child. I turned to leave, but before I did, I looked back at him one last time. "You may think you've gotten away with it, Tom, but trust me, this isn't over." As I walked away, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger, yes, but also relief. Confronting him hadn't fixed anything, but it was the first step to regaining control of my life. When I got home, Emily was waiting for me. She didn't say anything, but I could tell by the look on her face that she knew where I was. I didn't bother to explain. I just walked past her and went upstairs, closing the door behind me. I don't know what's going to happen next. Maybe I'll tell Tom's wife. Maybe I'll file for divorce. Maybe I'll burn all the Christmas decorations in this house and start over. But what I do know is this. I'm tired of being a victim. My name is Mark, and if you had asked me a few months ago to describe my life, I would have said it's good. Stable. Maybe not perfect, but what marriage could be perfect? I thought Emily and I were like any other couple, laughing at our inside jokes, raising 2 kids, coping with the daily grind. But now it all feels like a lie, and I don't even know who I am in the story. Since Emily's confession and my confrontation with Tom, I've been fixated, revisiting every moment of our life together and seeing it in a completely different light. Every Christmas, every glance across the room together, every compliment on her artwork, it's all tainted now. The memories no longer feel like mine. They feel like someone else's, like a version of me that was too blind or too stupid to see what was right in front of it. I keep asking myself the same questions. Was every holiday a sham? Did she love me the way I loved her? Did she feel any remorse for what she had done? Or was it all just a sham? The weight of it all was suffocating. 8 years. 8 years of lies hidden in plain sight under the glow of Christmas lights. I can't get over it. I look at her, and I feel like I'm looking at a stranger. Worst of all, she's being her usual self. She's trying, I have to give her credit, making dinner, asking how my day was, pretending we're doing well, but I see it in her eyes. The guilt, the fear that one day I'll wake up and decide I can't do this anymore. And honestly, I'm not sure I can. I've been spending a lot of time in the garage lately. It's the only place in the house where I feel like I can breathe. I sit there for hours, looking at the half-finished DIY projects I started months ago when I thought I had a future worth building. Silence is both a comfort and a curse. It gives me a chance to think, but the thoughts are not the kindest. Was I really not enough for her? The thought keeps coming back, no matter how hard I try to push it away. I know it's unfair to blame myself, but it's impossible not to wonder. What did Tom have that I didn't? Was he smarter? Funnier? Did he make her feel something I couldn't? I hate that I'm even asking these questions. I hate that her choices make me doubt myself. And then there's the other side of it. What kind of person does something like this? Emily wasn't just unfaithful, she was calculating. She didn't just betray me at the most crucial moment, she built an entire system to cover up her infidelity, using our family traditions as a cover. How do you forgive something like that? How do you rebuild trust when every memory seems poisoned? The kids don't know anything. At least, I don't think they know. They're too young to understand what's going on, and Emily and I have been careful not to spill our attention into their world. But kids aren't stupid. They can sense when something is wrong, even if they don't have the words to explain it. Our oldest, Jake, asked me the other day why I sleep on the couch. I told him it was because my back hurts, and he seemed to believe it. I hate lying to him. I hate that my own mess is now creeping into their lives. And then there are the neighbors. People are starting to notice that something's wrong. Tom and I used to chat in the driveway, waving to each other when we took out the trash. That's over now. I haven't spoken to him since the night I ran into him, and I avoid his house like the plague. Emily, for her part, does her best to keep up appearances. She waves to the neighbors, smiling at their comments about how quiet we've been lately. But I can see the cracks in her facade. She is as lost as I am. I'd like to say I'm handling this like a saint, but that would be a lie. I'm angry, angrier than I've ever been in my life. And the worst part is that I have no outlet for it. I can't yell at her when the kids are around. I can't take my anger out on Tom unless I want to end up in handcuffs. So the anger just sits there, simmering under the surface. It shows in the way I snap at her when she asks me a simple question, the way I avoid eye contact when she tries to talk to me. I know it's unhealthy, but I don't know how else to deal with it. And then there's the guilt. Because as much as I hate her for what she did, I still love her. That's what I don't understand. How can you love someone who's caused you so much pain? I know I can't go on living like this. At some point, I'm going to have to make a decision. Do I stay and try to repair the relationship, or do I leave and start over? The thought of leaving terrifies me. Not because I'm afraid of being alone. I think I can handle it. But because of what it would mean for the kids. They already have a lot of stability ripped out from under their feet. Do I really want to add more to that? But staying doesn't feel like staying either. Every time I look at her, I see a lie. Every time I see Christmas lights, I think about how they aren't meant for me. I don't know what the future holds for me. All I know is that I can't go back to the way things used to be. Too much has been broken. Too much has been lost. For now, all I can do is live one day at a time. One breath, one step, one choice at a time. But the weight of 8 years of betrayal is very heavy, and I don't know if I have the strength to carry it. My name is Mark, and if there's one thing I've learned in the past few months, it's that secrets don't stay buried. Especially in a neighborhood like ours, where everyone knows everyone and gossip spreads faster than wildfire. Emily's affair didn't just ruin our marriage. It painted a huge target on our family for all the nosy neighbors within a 2-block radius. I realized things were about to change when I talked to Tom. You can't slap a man on the porch of his own house and expect life to go back to normal. But I wasn't prepared for the rumors to start spreading so quickly and for them to get ugly. It was subtle at first. The leering glances, the half-hearted hand-waving, people suddenly finding reasons to cross the street when they saw me coming. I thought that maybe I was imagining it all, that my paranoia was making me realize too much. But then the questions followed. Hey Mark, is everything okay with you and Tom? Noticed you haven't turned on the lights this year. Everything okay at home? We missed your display this Christmas. It's always the best outside. On the surface, the questions were quite innocent, but I could see the curiosity behind them, the hunger for drama. Of course, no one talks about it directly. No one wants to admit they're ferreting out details of your personal life. But the whispers started soon after. It didn't take long for these stories to take on a life of their own. One day, I overheard an elderly couple living next door talking in their backyard. Have you heard about Emily and Tom? I heard Mark caught them in the act. No, I heard it was something with Christmas lights. Can you believe it? I didn't stick around to hear the rest. It was unpleasant enough knowing what people were saying about us behind our backs. Hearing it firsthand was like pouring salt on an open wound. The thing is, I couldn't blame them. If the roles were reversed, I'd be curious too. Cases are like car accidents. You don't want to look, but you can't look away. And in a community like ours, where everyone prides themselves on their friendship and cohesion, a scandal like this should have shaken up the community. But knowing this didn't make life any easier. Over the next few weeks, the tension between our house and Tom's became impossible to ignore. Emily and I stopped waving to our neighbors. The few friends we had on the street began to keep their distance, not knowing which side to take. Tom and his family weren't much better off. I noticed that his wife, Linda, began to avoid me. She used to stop and chat when we ran into each other at the mailbox, but now she barely made eye contact with me. Part of me wondered if she knew the truth, or if Tom had made up some story to cover his tracks. The funny thing was, I'd always considered our neighborhood a second family. We lived here for 10 years, watched our kids grow up with the other kids on the street. I never thought we'd become the outcasts of the neighborhood, the couple everyone whispers about, thinking we can't hear. Christmas was the hardest. For years, our house was the crown jewel of the neighborhood's holiday decorations. Emily's light shows were legendary and people traveled from all over to see them. But this year, the house was dark. No lights, no garlands, no inflatable snowmen on the lawn. I couldn't bring myself to do it. Just the thought of hanging those garlands and standing outside and pretending everything was fine made me sick to my stomach. The neighbors noticed, of course. They noticed everything in general. I could see them looking at our house as they passed by, confusion and pity on their faces. Some of them probably thought we were just going through a rough patch, that we would recover next year. Others, I'm sure, had already added that to their growing list of reasons to avoid us. I've always loved Christmas. It was my favorite time of year, the lights, the music, the sense of community. But now it seemed like a wicked joke to me. Every time I saw a string of twinkling lights or heard a song on the radio, I thought only of betrayal. The whispers were not limited to our homes. They spread throughout the neighborhood, dividing people into camps. Some were on our side, expressing quiet support in the form of sympathetic nods or kind words. Others sided with Tom, believing whatever version of events he came up with to save face. I even heard someone start a rumor that Emily and I were breaking up because of my affair. The irony in that almost made me laugh. Almost. But what hurt the most was the realization that we'd lost something we could never get back. Gone was the sense of community. Our street was no longer a home. It was just a set of houses filled with people who saw us as entertainment. I don't know what the future holds. Emily and I are still trying to figure out where to go next, both as a couple and as individuals. The thought of leaving the neighborhood has crossed my mind more than once, but it feels like escapism. Besides, moving won't erase the damage that has been done. Truth be told, I don't know if I'll ever feel at home here again. Every time I see Tom's house, every time I hear a whisper, it's like a fresh wound opening up. But I'm trying. I'm trying to focus on my kids, on my job, on the parts of my life that still feel solid. I don't know if it will be enough to rebuild what has been destroyed, but for now, it's all I have. The truth has already been discovered, and there's no getting it back. But maybe there is a way to move forward. I don't know what that looks like yet, but hopefully time will give me the answers I can't find on my own. I never thought my life would come to this, standing on the edge of everything I thought I knew and trying to decide whether to fight for a marriage that is more like a cage, or walk away and start over. It's been months since Emily's cheating came to light, and I still don't have all the answers. Part of me wonders if I'll ever get them. I've spent countless sleepless nights going over every moment of our relationship in my head, trying to figure out where things went wrong. Was it me? Was it her? Or was it some fatal flaw in the foundation we built our lives on? I've been trying to make sense of it all, to understand why she acted the way she did. She says she's sorry, that she never meant to hurt me, that it was a mistake that got out of control. But the thing is, mistakes don't last 8 years at a time. Mistakes don't include coded messages, secret meetings, and lies told so lightly that they become embedded in the fabric of your daily life. This is the part that haunted me the most, the lie. It wasn't just random or conjectural. It was woven into everything. Every holiday, every gathering, every shared memory now seemed tainted by her betrayal. The light was the worst. After a confrontation with Tom and a showdown with the neighbors, I still couldn't bring myself to put up the Christmas decorations this year. They still sit in the garage, neatly packed in the same plastic containers we've used over the years. Every time I see them, I feel a knot tighten in my chest. It's ironic, isn't it? What used to bring so much joy now seems like a monument to all that has been lost. I think of how those lights used to shine, how proud Emily was of her window displays, how people used to come here just to admire them. Now they are just a reminder of something I can't forget. Emily suggested that this year we do away with Christmas altogether. She said it would be easier that way, that we could focus on the kids and try to create new memories. But I knew the real reason. She didn't want to face the stares, the whispers, the questions from people who used to admire us. Our home seemed different now, quieter, colder. And it's not just the lack of decorations, it's the weight of the unspoken. We go on with our lives, trying to maintain a normal life for the kids, but there's a distance between us that wasn't there before. She's trying. You have to give her credit for that. She's become more attentive, more present, more desperate. She wants to make things right, to restore what we had. And part of me wants that too. But there's another part of me, a big part, that wonders if it's even possible. Right now, forgiveness seems impossible. Every time I look at her, I see betrayal. I see the nights she spent outside adjusting the lights, the notebook filled with their secret code, the way she looked at me when she finally confessed. I see the life we were supposed to have, shattered into pieces I don't know how to put back together. In the end, I had to decide, stay and try to salvage what was left, or leave and start over. It's not an easy choice to make. On the one hand, we've spent over a decade building a life together. We have 2 kids, a house, memories that stretch back to when we were just a couple of unemployed college students figuring out what the hell we were doing with our lives. On the other hand, how do you rebuild trust when it's been completely destroyed? How do you share a bed with someone who has lied to your face for years? Truth be told, I don't have a clear answer. All I know is that I can't keep living like this, stuck between the past and the future, unable to move forward in either direction. So I made a choice. As the Christmas season came to a close, I stood in my yard and watched the neighbors begin to take down their decorations. Each day the street became more empty and the glow of the holidays faded into the cold, gray days of January. I thought of our garlands still stacked in the garage. I remembered the years spent installing them, the nights we stood outside admiring our work, the pride I felt when people praised our display. And then I thought about the truth, the lies, the betrayals, the secrets hidden in those flickering bulbs. That night, I made a decision. I went to the garage, picked up the baskets of jewelry, and took them to the local donation center. I couldn't bring myself to throw them away. It was too final, too cruel. But I also knew I couldn't keep them. As I watched the workers unload the containers, I felt a strange sense of relief. It wasn't a final decision, but it was a step, a way to let go of the past, even if only for a little while. Emily and I are still deciding what to do next. I've told her that I need space, that I'm not ready to forgive her, but I'm not ready to give up completely either. For now, we are living as co-parents, trying to keep things stable for the kids while we sort out our own issues. I don't know if it will work out. Part of me hopes we can find our way back to each other to rebuild something that feels real. But another part of me wonders if it's better to end the loss and move on. I know for a fact that the marriage we had, the one I thought we had, is gone. The light has gone out, and with it the illusion of a life that was never what it seemed. It is the end of an era, and perhaps the beginning of something new.